We all know the feeling of a world moving too fast. The deadlines pile up, the phone won't stop buzzing, and you find yourself wishing you could just pause the universe for a moment to catch your breath. For one man, that impossible wish became his physical reality. He looked out at a world where gravity seemed to have checked out. Spilled coffee hung midair in shimmering brown droplets, and commuters were locked in place like wax figures. Yet he remained perfectly free to move. Initially, this felt like the ultimate liberation. Imagine a life without cues, without red lights, and without anyone telling you no. He was no longer a passenger in the world. He was its master. In those first hours, having limitless time looked like the pinnacle of human achievement, a state of total, frictionless control over the fabric of reality. His playground stretched for miles. The entire city, once a grid of obstacles and noise, had become a silent, sprawling gallery designed for his eyes only. In a frozen world, the very concept of access changes. Physical barriers like locked doors and authorized personnel-only signs become meaningless suggestions. He spent his time wandering through the most exclusive penthouses and private vaults, standing in places he'd previously only seen in photographs. He took whatever he wanted. He could drape himself in the finest clothes or stack gold bars on a sidewalk, knowing that the legal system was as motionless as the people it was built to govern. This visualizes a temporal monopoly. While the rest of the world is stripped of its ability to act, a single node hoards 100% of the time supply. He achieved a perfect monopoly on the most valuable resource. But as the hours stretched into what felt like days, the thrill of the heist began to wear thin. He had all the money in the world, but nowhere to spend it. He had every masterpiece ever painted, but no one to talk to about them. The absolute control he'd craved was starting to feel heavy. A world without consequences is also a world without feedback. When every action you take is met with the same cold, unmoving silence, your impact on the world effectively drops to zero. Up close, the physics of a frozen world are stifling. He tried to nudge someone, to spark even a flicker of movement, but the people around him were as unyielding as granite. This flowchart tracks the breakdown of simple physics. Normally, every action triggers a reaction. In stasis, every input leads to a blocked, voided output state. This applies socially, too. He could smile or shout, but there was no mechanism to trigger a response. Time perception usually relies on change, the sun moving across the sky or the rhythmic ticking of a clock. Without those signals, the man lost his bearings. He couldn't tell if he'd been alone for 6 minutes or 6 months. The fantasy of omnipotence had collapsed into the reality of a sensory deprivation tank. He screamed into the crowd, hoping for the slightest movement, an echo, or even a blink. But the world was deaf to him. To have absolute, unyielding control over your surroundings, you have to eliminate every unpredictable variable. You have to stop anything from happening without your permission. But human life is defined by the unpredictable. Other people are the only sources of new information and genuine surprise we have. By removing the unpredictability of others, he had removed the friction required to feel alive. Without that resistance, his own actions had lost their meaning. Total power over a static world is indistinguishable from total isolation. He realized that he would trade his entire monopoly for one single unscripted response from a stranger. He stood still, closed his eyes, and chose to let the clock start ticking again. The roar of the city returned instantly. The chaos and noise he once tried to escape proved he was no longer alone. He was back in the crowd, navigating the same busy sidewalks and waiting for the same lights. But now, the unpredictability of the people around him felt like a relief rather than a burden. We tend to think of time as something we possess individually, but it only carries value when it is relational. In a vacuum, it is worthless. The things we often complain about, the interruptions from friends, or the way time seems to slip through our fingers, are the exact mechanisms that make our hours feel significant. Our objective shouldn't be to master the clock or seize control over every moment. It should be to ensure that the time we